I want to thank you all for your response to the first video we did. We received quite a number of responses and have reviewed them all. It wouldn't surprise you to know that a couple were really critical, in fact felt like broadsides, and others were very complimentary. And that of course represents the range of views around Holy Blossom that makes it so vibrant. Suffice to say though, that the overall message is this is a very special place and we really have to get on with it, rejuvenating it and building on its great past history with a future-looking spirit. So with that in mind, we're going to continue this series of communications with you on a regular basis. And on each occasion we'll address one or another topic that either may have come from suggestions you have made or our own observations of the work we are doing. We'll talk about education. We'll talk about the new building. We'll talk about governance. We'll talk about finance, and who knows what else we'll talk about as time goes on. For today, however, I'd like to talk about governance. And I'm doing that for a couple of reasons. First, this is really the core of how we make decisions, how we lead the congregation, and how all of us as members of this congregation are represented to the leadership. Sometimes it's as dry as matzah, but in fact it's the nuts and bolts of how we do our work and build this place. A couple of weeks ago, the Coming Together Committee presented its report to the board. We've received it, we are considering it, and in fact, in some of the activities I'm going to relate to you now, you'll see that some of the issues that have been raised have already been addressed. If you're to look at the composition of this year's board, in fact it's younger, newer, and more diverse than it ever has been. And these people are all engaged in a very active way in transforming and updating everything we do. In addition to preparing to bring forward something called a governance report, which has been several years in the making, we're also on a day-by-day process building in improved governance structures. The board has approved a code of conduct for all of its members, and that will be shared with the congregation as a whole. We've introduced a board evaluation process to evaluate how we are working in meetings and how we are performing as a board as a whole. We're looking at the way the nomination committee process works. And in fact, the nomination committee was structured earlier this year with a view to a long-term horizon, because in fact it's part of the way we build leadership at Holy Blossom. There are so many roles to play, and the nomination committee thinks about what the board needs, receives information from the board, and with a long-term horizon and with a view to the diverse membership of the board, it selects members who may then be invited to put their names forward to serve as our leaders. One of the things we're also working on is a statement of identity, a brief expression of the values of Holy Blossom that we can all gather around and upon which we can build all of our activities. It's not a restrictive mirror in any sense, but is designed to be a simple phrase that encompasses and enables us to reach out and do all sorts of activities along the dimensions that we all think are important. Our spiritual values, our educational aspirations, our thoughts about Israel, and our ability to hear from and communicate to a much broader world. We're developing a much more sophisticated board orientation process with materials to read and educational seminars to be had. And in fact, when the board met for the first time this year, the first two meetings were around exactly that. How do we govern ourselves? How are we oriented? What are our values? And what do we do? So as you can see, we're moving along. We really want to hear from you. And as we talk in future sessions about education and the building and finance, it'll be the same sort of conversation, responding to your questions, trying to anticipate your needs and curiosities, and most of all, to try and deeply engage you in this place, because it's such a worthwhile thing to do.